Welcome to Eating Enlightenment, the show that explores individual transformation stories around food, eating, body, mind, and healing. In particular, giving exploration towards the cognitive, the thoughts, the mental paradigms, the ability to reconnect with your body, the tools and strategies that work, and just having some fun along the way. I'm Jared, and long story short, I struggled with food. I was a wrestler. I became freaking miserable. I became a monk because I was so miserable. And up in the mountains, got some meditation goodness. And now I'm all about spreading the mindful vibe. And my role in this podcast is to simply explore, ask great questions, and stay in the present moment with my guest. My guest today is Kathleen Layer, and she has a fascinating and humorous and energetic retelling and recount of her experiences shifting away from dieting to intuitive eating, the struggles, the surprises, the things that she finds most beneficial about intuitive eating, and we have a lot of fun, I think. So, without further ado, let's dive in and welcome Kathleen Layer.
In a nutshell, what makes you so passionate about this field?
I would say it's really because, and I think a lot of people in this field experience the same thing, is that I really struggled with my relationship to food and my body for almost a decade. And it really started for me in college. And obviously after college and all of that. And once I discovered intuitive eating, like I literally just kind of stumbled upon it on Instagram and I started reading about it. Everything just kind of clicked for me like right away. And the more I got into the intuitive eating practice and started kind of breaking through all these beliefs that I had about food in my body and having like a completely different experience with that myself, I was like, all of a sudden, all these like light bulbs were going off. And I just realized like, okay, I have to like tell people about this because I don't think anyone knows that you don't have to obsess over food. You don't have to obsess over your body and all of that. And so kind of from that moment, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I need to figure out like how I can make this kind of what I do in the world.
Totally. I know in therapy school and counseling school, they said oftentimes counselors are drawn into this field because they've overcome something themselves.
Yeah.
And like, so you fell in love with intuitive eating right away. Like, was there any specific principle that resonated with you? Like, did you try letting go of food rules, or did you try noticing satisfaction? Was there any like specific, not rule, but principle rather,
Yeah.
that really resonated with you in the beginning?
I think what kind of attributed to like my instant connection with it was really going into rejecting the diet mentality and like all of those, basically like myth busting like everything I knew. And I was at that point in my life where I guess in my life with dieting and body image and all of that, that I could tell I was getting really tired of it. Like I was trying so many different things and I had all these different goals and I had shifted in all these different ways from like obsessing over like calories and doing, lots of cardio in that way. And then to shifting over to like clean eating and CrossFit and macros and like so many different avenues. And at the end of the day, I was like, okay, I'm still not like quote unquote where I want to be with my body. And I just was so tired of tracking everything and doing all that. So I think I was like slowly breaking myself down from like my diet culture beliefs already. And I'd been almost like looking back on it, I feel like I was hoping, like looking for an out, but I couldn't really find one. And so I was almost prepared, like that perfect storm of that moment, because I know if I would have been introduced to intuitive eating like a year before, 2 years before, or whatever, I don't think I would have had the same like aha moment. But I think really just like the research of rejecting the diet mentality and just hearing these stories about like, this is what happens when you diet and this is why like it's not your fault. I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly what's happened to me. It just like everything was clicking. And I felt like for the first time, someone was really hearing what I was going through.
Yeah, definitely. And it's such a like a different way. It's the opposite. That's the opposite of dieting, essentially.
Yes. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. So it was definitely that brought me to it, but not to say that like overnight I was just like, okay, like I'm perfectly good with food in my body now. Like there's definitely a longer practice to that, but I feel like the rejecting the diet mentality, just really seeing that just opened my eyes a lot.
What was the like most tiring aspect? You mentioned tracking. I know on your bio online at Kathleen Layer, KathleenLayer.com, you
Mhm.
mentioned going through all those things. You just mentioned the various diets, the CrossFit, the clean, and the whole, and the everything pretty much. What was like most tiring about it?
Yeah. I think just like every time I would hear like a new diet or lifestyle or whatever, especially being in the CrossFit community, there's just a lot of things going on. And not to hate on the CrossFit community, I still enjoy it, but I just was at a mental space that it wasn't great for me. And I think I just always heard from other people's account of like, okay, this is what will like my goal at that time was to have like the lowest body fat and to have like my stomach look a certain way. And I had a lot of attachment to my own worthiness with what my stomach looked like. And so that was my goal always.
Mm,
And I think for me, just hearing from other people, like, oh, well, this is what did it for me. Like, this is what did it for my body. So I kept trying all of these different things and I was never getting to that goal. And so it was just like getting on that
mm,
wheel of trying all these things, it never working, trying something new, getting really excited about it, it never working. And
mm.
kind of coming to that realization, especially when discovering intuitive eating and going down that path of like, my body is not meant to look like that, and that's
Mm,
okay.
mm.
But yeah, just like there's so much energy and effort that goes into tracking and going into those specific diets and lifestyles, and just my entire like brain space and my thoughts were
Yeah,
just around like always food, always my body. And it was just like, this can't be the way that I have to live my life forever. I can't keep doing this.
totally. It's crazy how much like it is crazy. It's just crazy, period. It's like
Period.
period. Yeah. And so when you got into intuitive eating, I love that instantaneous connection you mentioned. It seems like you were ready for it. Um, and it seems like hearing stories about and learning about the diet culture, like the science of why dieting is bad, and hearing stories of other people who gone the intuitive eating route, and it was all making sense for you. When you actually practically sat down in front of food, you know what I mean? Like where the rubber hits the road, and your first steps on the intuitive eating path. Like, were you nervous? Were you excited? What was kind of going through your head when you first started eating in an intuitive way?
Yeah. I think for me, first, the first thing that I dove into was just probably trying the making peace with food realm, and just allowing myself, giving myself permission to eat those foods that I had restricted or deemed as like off limits or bad, or processed foods and all of those things, just kind of allowing myself to eat those, and just feeling the freedom that it felt of like, oh, like this is okay, I'm allowed to do this, and like nothing bad's gonna happen. I think for me it really really helped for someone else, for me at that time, especially for someone else, meaning like Evelyn Tripoli, intuitive eating, and
Yeah.
this whole, to say like it's okay, you're allowed to do this, because for so long I had been looking at external sources to tell me like, oh, this is what you should do, this is what worked for me, like yada yada. And so just that like moment of permission from intuitive eating, like, hey, you're allowed to eat these foods. And this is actually, again, what connected with me is like the reason why you feel out of control around these foods is because you're restricting them and you're saying that they're bad. And it's like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Mm,
I think just with my brain, that really connected, just seeing not only being told like what's going on, but like why it's happening.
mm,
And so I felt like, okay, let's try this. And just so much freedom of like going to a restaurant and actually looking at like the mac and cheese and the pasta side of the menu instead
mm,
of only limiting myself to one. It just felt so much more freeing for
mm.
me. Um, and
This
I
was like
definitely,
not very anxiety provoking. Sometimes the making the piece of food can be like, okay, like I understand the restriction part, and then when the rubber hits the
right.
road, like, oh my god, like I'm anxious. Um, did anxiety come up for you in this process at all, or was it more so the freedom was more the primary energy, we'll say?
Yeah, I think what allowed me to have like less anxiety in that process is that for me with intuitive eating, it was a lot easier to wrap my mind around like, okay, you are free to eat the foods that you want. You're free to explore like all these foods you've restricted versus like intuitive movement or joyful movement, like that principle. Because for me, that was like, okay, it's okay if I'm like exploring intuitive eating as long as I'm working out like super hard every day.
Mm,
Almost like for a while, I was thinking like, well, I'll make up for this
yeah.
by still having that.
Mm.
And I think that's what really allowed me in that moment, not saying that this is
Sure,
the
sure. No,
approach,
yeah,
but I think that's what
yeah.
allowed me to like kind of dive in a little more freely into the
Mm,
eating part of it while
mm, mm.
still noticing that I was restricting just in a different way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I feel like that's a very understandable thing that you would compensate with exercise when you're trying these new foods. And
Yeah.
I guess in that sort of way, like probably the exercise and trying these new foods, you started to realize, like, hey, I can have these foods. Nothing too bad is going to happen, even though you're compensating on the other side with exercise.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's still like so many different like beliefs about bodies and like not wanting my body to change, but wanting to, you have those like competing thoughts of like, I want to be free from these thoughts. I want to have this freedom around food in my body, but also there's all these beliefs ingrained in me that like this is wrong and this is bad and you don't want anything to happen to your body and things like that. So it
Those
definitely
beliefs
was a
are so
practice.
difficult. They're
Yes.
like very subtle, they're invisible, they're slippery, they're confusing. Those beliefs are, and those thoughts, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess that's where the real work is, the real transformation.
Yeah. And I think what's even more difficult is that they're so normalized. Like it's not just, you believing these things and, everyone's like trying to tell you that they're not true. You're believing these things and everyone's trying to tell you like this is true and that, your body is wrong or you should always be um, living this certain way, eating this certain way and looking this certain way. And so it's really difficult to kind of dive into those and like start challenging them in different ways because I think we're almost programmed to think that like living healthy or like living a healthy life means that you almost like have to be miserable in certain ways
Yeah.
like and so that's hard to break free from and actually start questioning like is that really healthy for me to be obsessing over what I'm eating? Is it even though I was eating quote unquote healthy foods more often than not, is it really healthy that I was, thinking about all that all the time and obsessing over those foods and tracking those foods? Like, was that really adding to my health? And obviously it was not. So it's definitely a confusing
Yeah, totally.
place
Like
to be in.
we as I'll say Westerners or whoever tend to think like, oh, I'm eating healthy and like the good stuff is the stuff I can't have. I guess that comes
Yeah.
back to the idea of restriction. Like, why we lose control is because we have these black and white thinking. Like, humans want what we can't have. So if the good stuff is the
Right.
stuff we can't have, then we're gonna eventually give in to temptation, or whatever
Right.
the phrase is.
Right.
So when you so I in wrestling, I wrestled at what? I mean, I wrestled at a low 135 or something like that, whatever. But over the years, I've gained a considerable. I weigh a bunch more than that. So
Mhm.
I've my weight gain. There's been some concern, but also like I feel better than ever, and everything like that. I'm wondering, when you talk about bodies and so forth. You mentioned, I think, not everyone is meant to be in like a super small body, or I think you said something like that. Um,
Mhm.
on your website, you mentioned your self-esteem being based on like a thigh gap and a flat stomach.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and then, of course, you've also been talking about the exercise part helping you start the intuitive eating journey. And now that you're well into the intuitive eating journey, um, what's your relationship with exercise right now?
Yeah. Um, that's a very good question. And my relationship with movement is completely different than it was even just probably like 4 or 5 years ago. Um, and really what my relationship to movement was is very restrictive. Like it had to be super intense. I had to be like drip sweating. I had to do it every single day. If I didn't, I felt really anxious. I felt really guilty. I felt like I had to make up for that somehow. And it was just a very controlling relationship with movement, which was also confusing for me because I do really enjoy moving my body and I did enjoy the movement I was doing. But again, like it's so exhausting to feel like you can't not go. Is almost like trapped by movement, I feel like. And then now I have shifted into this really kind of for my body. And I allow that to kind of ebb and flow with different seasons. I allow myself to, you know, just go for walks or do the restorative yoga or do absolutely nothing. And it doesn't mean anything about me. And it's really just about what kind of calms me down and allows me to move. And it's just super flexible and it feels so much better and so much more freeing to have that kind of relationship.
Definitely. It really does make a difference. Like, I think what you spoke about, that compulsion, that if you don't get a crazy sweat, if you don't get that point of exhaustion, that you feel guilty. And then there's that, like, that pressure, and there's those, like, I have to do this, that
Hmm.
controlling relationship. Yeah, I think that's like really difficult. And then as you have switched to walking and being more gentle, has your body changed?
Yeah. Um, my body has definitely changed because I have I was like I mentioned a little bit before, my main form of movement was CrossFit. So I was lifting a lot. I was doing a lot of um, heavy lifting and CrossFit style workouts and things like that. I was doing some competitions and all of that. So I definitely have lost muscle mass in that way. Like I can see my body and notice like that it's softer. And there's just not that kind of like muscle tone or definition and things like that. I When it comes to weight, I have no idea because I could not tell you the last time that I weighed myself.
Awesome.
Um, but yeah, like I definitely see like subtle differences in my body, and I think it's also important to note that everybody when they're going through like shifting their relationship or healing their relationship with food in their body will have such different experiences. And some people will stay like the same, some people will gain weight, some people might lose weight, and it all can be totally okay. And it all is part of like your individual experience. So I would say that my body has changed, yes. But also just noting that everyone has such a different experience with that as well.
Yeah. Everyone's experience is so different. I know for me, like I've definitely, yeah, gotten softer and yeah, softer, I guess, like when you're weightlifting every day and going really hard and doing
Yeah.
all this cardio and et cetera, like, and then you naturally sort of just, it's not that fun. Whatever, like it's really not helping me in every area of life. Like, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I've noticed for me, like, I've gotten bigger and softer and I'm not as strong. And I sometimes I do struggle with that or not. Yeah, no, sometimes I wish, I wish sort of like, I wish I was stronger. I wish I was as strong as I used to be. But at the same time too, like, I think, the overall health, we'll say, is like much better for me.
Yeah.
I feel like this that's been sort of my experience. Like, getting a little bigger and softer, but also, um, feeling a lot better, like sleeping
Yeah.
better and having way better energy. And I don't get sick that like I can't remember the last time I was sick. Like I haven't been sick once in
Yeah.
COVID, and I'm
I
pretty
love
sure it's
that
because
you
like my
mentioned.
mental health or whatever is like a lot better. And I don't
Yeah.
know, I just like I bring in like a positive vibrancy to people. I feel like that was missing earlier. I was like more exhausted and getting sick more often and depleted, even though like I was in quote unquote better shape. Like, you know?
Yeah. I when you said that the sick comment, I was like, I was just thinking about that the other day. And when it comes to like my health, and I think that's such a good point to bring up, that we're so conditioned to believe like if you know you took like a before and after picture of my body or something and saw when I was in my heavy CrossFit days and things like that, and then seeing my body now, like you would see those changes, and someone might think like, oh, that body, that CrossFit body is healthier. When I was in that body, like physically, I wasn't as healthy. Mentally, emotionally, hell no, was not as healthy. And I would also, as the same way, like I did not have a ton of energy. I would get sick so often. I felt like just like, and thinking about that for myself now, that kind of clicked with me of like, yeah, I can't. And so thankful, especially being in the pandemic, like I can't remember the last time that I was sick. And just knowing how much my mental and physical and emotional health, like even going to the doctor and having like just stress completely lowered and blood pressure lowered and my heart rate is low. Like everything is just so much different because I was living in such a high stress environment and that looked healthy. If someone saw what I ate and saw what I looked like and saw how I worked out, they'd think, oh my gosh, she's so healthy. But it was the complete opposite experience if you
Yeah,
really dove in.
totally. And I want to bring up like, um, we're both thin and white,
Yes.
and so I wondered if you have any words, I don't know, compassion, wisdom, encouragement, any sort of words for someone who, let's say, doesn't matter about skin color really, but let's say they're not in a thin body. And so they say, oh, it's great that, oh, you gained a little bit of weight, but you're like,
Hmm.
you're still skinny and blah, blah, blah. Like, you're like overall, like, oh, you can gain a few pounds, but like, you're still slender overall. Like, I'm not in the same boat. So, uh,
Yeah.
I just wanted to see if you could respond to that person if they had asked you, if they had mentioned something like that.
Yeah. That is a really great question to bring up because I know that that's something that I have had experience, especially with like friends and family members who I'm not working with one on one, but will just kind of make comments about that. when they don't necessarily like they understand intuitive eating and kind of what I'm doing, but don't believe that like it is right for them. Um, but I do want to say that, yeah, everyone's body and everyone's experience in their body, like body size, skin color, all of those things are going to add like completely different experiences of how you live in the world and how people perceive you and how you imagine people perceive you and all of those things. And I think what my main response to would be to that like particular person would be that it really does not matter, and they can think about instances themselves. It really doesn't matter what your body looks like if you're not if you can't change the way that you think and feel about your body as it is now, even if your body got smaller or your body, whatever you're trying to do with your body happened, your thoughts and your feelings about yourself still would not change. And I
Mm.
think a great example of this is when you look at like an old picture of yourself and you think like, oh my God, I wish like I looked like that now. But thinking about that person that you were in that photo is like, well, she was also wishing that she was smaller. Like she also did not feel good enough in her body. She also was having these obsessive thoughts about food and body and all of those things. So it's really not about your body. It's about how you are perceiving your body, the way that you treat your body, the thoughts and feelings you have about your body. And so really wanting to work on that um, versus anything else.
Ooh, that is so good. I love the way you said it. The I love what you said. You your confidence and just like the truth. That's the truth, right? Like
Yeah.
that's just the truth. And I think we all recognize that. Um, yeah. What's been the most difficult part of walking the intuitive eating journey for you? Is it dealing with
Mm.
some of these, like some ways I feel like it's easy. Oh, if I was just thinner, then all my problems would go away. And like you can obsessively focus on that. And then
Mhm.
like it can be more difficult, like working on your own relationship with your body. Not that that is the most difficult piece, or what in your words is the most difficult piece for you in being an intuitive eater?
Yeah. Um, that's a good question. I I think something that, and I don't know if this will directly go into like intuitive eating specifically, but I feel like it all comes together. But I think something that I've been really noticing lately and that I've been really interested in learning more about is just how the body has been kind of perceived in throughout history. And I think what has been the most difficult part for me is like learning all these things about diets and how they don't work, and learning about all these things that we've been told are healthy and are not healthy, and learning about the way bodies are supposed to be, but they're not actually supposed to be that way. And trying to kind of communicate this, but also um, not, I guess, there's just still so much out there that people I guess are is like blocking our way to actually allow ourselves to live in our own bodies. And I think it's really difficult to learn all of this information, learn all of
Yeah.
these truths,
Uh-huh.
and for it to be like, okay, how are we still like looking at health this way? How are we still treating certain bodies and certain people this way? Like, why is this still happening? And I think that's probably a really frustrating thing for me to
Yeah.
to kind of wrap my head around and try and work through that as well.
So totally. I don't know if it's me or whatever, but my thoughts always go towards like, how do we change the world? And maybe everyone's
Yeah.
thoughts go there. And sometimes I'm like, I think we all run up against the human nature part of things because,
Hmm.
dieting is so simple, sort of like
Yeah.
basically eat less, and if you eat less, you'll see your body get thinner, but of course it's temporary and there's a lot of cost with that. but
Mhm.
I sometimes feel, I don't know, despair. I don't know, like it, because this whole intuitive eating thing, you mentioned the difficult part is it's difficult to learn. Like there, it's nuanced.
Yeah.
It's uh it's nuanced, I'd say. It's not just eat less and that's pretty, it's not like dieting is so simple. It's eat less and that's whatever. Exercise, it's like it's so simple. Intuitive eating, I don't know. It seems like it's nuanced and it's complicated, and I don't know. I feel like that is a difficult thing. And I don't know if I don't know if intuitive eating will ever replace dieting. I don't know. Maybe I'm a pessimist.
Yeah, I mean, it is like it's funny because I think as humans we're like, okay, we just want to like be told what to do, especially because living in diet culture has told us that you can't trust your body, that your body can't tell you what to do. You can't listen to your body, even though that's what your body is designed to do. So our body has that capability. But then once we get old enough to receive these messages, we're like, okay, so I'm not supposed to trust my body. My body has no idea what the hell it's doing. Like, so then it's like, oh, so I need someone to tell me exactly what to do. And it does, it feels really safe and easy because you're like, okay, I just do this, this, and this. I follow this plan, but then it inevitably does not work out because it's not sustainable and it's not meant to work for you. And so it's so interesting to think like, oh, we think that that is so much easier than just letting our body like operate how it's supposed to do, and like we don't even have to think about it. Like if we didn't have this diet culture, and for people who are well into their intuitive eating journey and can really listen to their body and things like that, like it's a very automatic process and you don't have to think about it that much, and there's no tracking and there's no looking up diets and there's no like, you know, failing and getting things right and wrong. Like it actually is so much easier. But even for me, when I started this journey, and then for clients and anyone else who's thinking about intuitive eating, it does seem in their brain like so much harder because for so long they've been told, like, no, your body has no idea what it's doing. It can't
Yeah,
be true.
yeah, no, totally. There's the oh, what's that? That we have these phrases in society like mind over matter.
Yeah,
Just just do it, right? I mean,
just
that's
do
just do it, right? Like
it.
just work out 6 hours a day. It's all in your mind. Mind over matter. Pain, no
Yeah,
pain, no pain, no gain.
yeah,
I don't know these things, and like maybe this is super philosophical. No, philosophy. But there's that quote. My no. Hold on. It was I think, therefore I am.
oh yeah.
This was by Descartes, the guy who maybe invented science or whatever. I think, therefore I am. I tend to think it's the opposite. Like I am, I have a body, I
Mm,
exist, and therefore I think. But somehow we I don't know, like
yeah,
somehow long time ago kind of got that the opposite way. Like, mind is, the body's a tool, and just like I
right,
can pick up and drop a tool, I can do that with my body. And
yeah,
yeah, these things go deep. And yeah, so sometimes I can be a little bit despairing about if people will learn intuitive eating on a widespread scale. But I think things are changing, and I think stories that you mentioned, like when you first started intuitive eating, hearing stories of other people
yeah.
are really important to share, and that's kind of like one goal of this podcast. But speaking of positive stories, I was hoping as we kind of wrap up today, but maybe you could share a bit about that freedom. Like you mentioned
Mhm,
this freedom of movement, and we've talked about some of the benefits where you're not as sick, you have more energy, you're more positive, and so forth. Like
mhm.
those are all great things. How has your by being more free, by being more
Yeah.
positive, how has your life changed? Are you, I don't know, how has your life changed in a, bite your teeth into it practical way,
Juicy
like,
way.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, in so many ways. I mentioned before that when before intuitive eating, like my brain was just filled with obsessive thoughts and anxious thoughts and worrying about food and what I was eating, and am I tracking this right? And am I going to get my workout in? And all of those things. And it was really disruptive to like the fun things in my life, like just being able to go out to dinner or make the decision of like, oh, should tonight be like my cheat meal, or going on vacation, like always worrying about like, well, how am I going to find like my foods, or where am I going to work out? Like it was all just, I couldn't be present in anything I was doing. And I think the biggest thing that shifted for me is when I found this freedom with intuitive eating and with my body and with movement, all of that brain space was completely freed up. And I finally was like, oh wow, I have so much energy to like put towards other things. And I think, you know, number one, I was able to go back to school, get my health coaching certification, get my intuitive eating certification, start my own business, start working with clients. Like, I mean, that in itself was just such a huge shift for me, because it's like, oh, I didn't have space to think past like, oh, you know, my job's fine with it, whatever, like I'm good with it. It's whatever. My main goal was the food and the body, even realizing that I wasn't really happy in my job at all. And so, yeah, I was able to start a business. I feel like my relationship with myself obviously is so much better. And that allows me to have such a stronger relationship with my husband, with my parents, with my family, with my friends. I think the biggest thing you develop with intuitive eating is compassion, and like trading in that judgment for compassion and curiosity. And when you're able to do that with yourself, like I just know that I am so much more compassionate with everyone around me. I'm so much more understanding, so much more positive in my experiences with them. I actually have the space to like be there for them and listen to them. And there's just so, you know, when I'm traveling, when I'm doing things, like I'm actually present, I'm actually having fun. I'm focused on that versus what my body looks like. And it's just, yeah, it's such a more freeing way to live your life. And there's so much more room for opportunities to actually like live your life to the potential, and like, yeah, the potential that you really want it to be.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking and really getting from you as well. When you're trapped in these thoughts, it's hard to, you just don't have the energy, the there's no way to do new things, there's no way to
Yeah.
grow, because all this like energy is just being like put into this frustrating cycle. And you know, yeah, I
Yeah.
love it. Um,
Yeah.
where can people contact you? You know, where can people find you online?
Yes. So they can find me at my website is just kathleenlayer.com. There's a lot of information on there. And then I spend a decent amount of time on Instagram. So that is just at Kathleen Layer as well. So I would say those are the two best spots.
Awesome. And then we'll say we're going to wrap up on this final question, but what does enlightenment mean to you?
Ooh. Love it. I think enlightenment to me, I feel like the first thing that comes into my head is just like having that moment in your life where everything feels like really connected. Like you feel very connected to yourself. You feel very connected to like your space in the world right now. You feel connected to the things outside of you and around you. And I feel like, yeah, that's really what came up to me, is just that overall like connection. You feel really aligned. Um, yeah.
Oh, that makes total sense. I love that. Connection. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Kathleen, for coming on today.
Thank you. This was so fun.
All right. Namaste, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. It really does mean the world to me. And be sure to check out the Eating Enlightenment journaling app on iTunes and iOS. It's also available on my website at eatingenlightenment.com. But try it out. Download the app, start today, because it's pretty simple and quick to get the hang of this really simple guideline. Journal before you eat, journal with awareness before you eat, write out your thoughts and feelings in the app before you eat. Do that. You will see results right away. You will start rethinking and changing your eating decisions. You won't binge as much if you write stuff down. It's that simple. I want you to try it for yourself. I want you to go to the iOS store right now while it's fresh on your mind. While it's fresh on your mind, go to the iOS store right now, download the Eating Enlightenment app or Android, or go to eatingenlightenment.com. It's right on the front page. Download the app. Give it a shot before your next meal. You can start today. You can literally start writing your thoughts and feelings out on paper, getting those neural connections established from your feeling body to your mind. You can start building those neural pathways, which are going to help you change your eating habits in a really practical way. You'll see changes right away. You will realize that the unhealthy food right in front of you you don't even want it. You realize, why am I even going towards it? Why am I grabbing towards it? You'll put it away. You'll move on with your day. You'll be more present with others because you got those thoughts out of your head. Even if they're crazy thoughts, you got them out of your head onto paper, and now you can be more present with people because your mind is more free. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm going on a ramble, but the point is, if you struggle with food, and let's be honest here, some of you listening do, that's okay. If you're a creative person, you like expressing yourself via the written word, right? This journaling thing isn't for everyone, but if you struggle with food and you're a creative person on one side, or you're highly organized, extremely hard worker, and logical on the other side, the journal is meant for those folks, and those folks love the journal. Highly organized people are able to finally struggle to get their feelings out on paper, but writing is something that they can do. It's natural to them. And then the organized person who's maybe more chaotic is actually able to put structure to their thoughts and feelings around food. It's just a amazing practice that can honestly change your life. That will change your life. The more you commit to this, the more you understand this. So, you know what to do, and stay tuned for the next episode coming up.